Hey everyone, and welcome to the Slow Burn Garage. I'm Blake, and last time we talked a little bit about MGBs and why I picked this one to replace my Miata. Now this car drove off of the trailer, but only barely. So today we're gonna put together a plan and start fixing that. All right, so first things first, why don't we take a look under the hood and see what we have? I should have known. It's a big list of problems. I got just the thing for this right in here. A project board. I found another one. I don't know how that got in there. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We've got a few different priorities, so we gotta start at the beginning with the showstoppers. If these things don't get done, there's no point doing anything else. So those are number one. We're gonna have priority two, which is safety stuff. It's great to get the car driving, but if we can't get it to stop or if it's gonna fall apart on us, it's not gonna go to the show under its own power. Priority three is other important stuff. Maybe they don't necessarily stop us, but it's probably a good idea to get them done. Last, good to haves. So let's start sorting this stuff out. First thing we're gonna do, we're gonna rebuild the car. Take it off, take it apart, make sure everything's working great. Next, we're gonna check the ignition. The previous owner said that the vacuum advance was sticking. I don't know how true this is. We're gonna find out. Next, we're gonna adjust the valves. On new cars, you don't actually need to do this because it's all hydraulic. But this old stuff, all manual. Next, while we're in there, we're also gonna do a compression check. We're gonna find out if this engine is even worth doing all this work on. Now, if all this stuff gets worked out, then we can move on to the stuff that we need to make the car safe. So, number one, we gotta check out the brakes. They feel fine from the 10 kilometers an hour I did from the trailer to the garage, but we need to make sure. Next, we gotta check the suspension. For all we know, something's gonna fall right off the car when we're on the highway. Other really important thing, we gotta fix the emergency brake. The handbrake lever is completely stuck. And I don't like the idea of driving an unknown car unless we have that backup option. Now some other important stuff. Stuff like, turn signals. Right now you can signal to the left, but the switch physically won't go to the right. So we gotta figure that out. Additionally, every little bump in the car, you hear a whole bunch of stuff rattle. So we gotta fix all the shaky stuff. Along with the turn signal, we also gotta fix the key. You actually can't get it out of the ignition right now. I don't like the idea of leaving the car around with a key in it. So if we wanna drive it, it's gotta be done. Okay, now last category of stuff that's nice to have, but isn't necessarily gonna stop me from making the trip. For example, changing the oil. There's oil in it. Is it gonna die on the first drive? Probably not, but probably should do it. Also, there's a giant exhaust leak. Now my plan is to swap out the carburetors and exhaust later, so I don't want to replace it. So I'm gonna have to get a little bit creative, but also if I don't fix it, big deal. Last thing is that the battery is floating around in its spot, so we need something to hold it there properly. Now that we've got a plan to get the car drivable, the first step is gonna be removing the carburetor. So this hose here is just coming apart as I'm trying to get it off. So we're just doing the best that we can here. Success. That one's loose. Okay, here we go. Just like that. If you've ever heard of a carburetor, that's exactly what this is. This is what you just saw me take off of the car so that I can rebuild it. When this is on the car, air goes through here, past the throttle plate, and into the engine. Now, I just want to go over a few of the main parts of a carburetor. At the end of the day, they have a bunch of delicate little bits, but they're actually not that complicated in principle. Gasoline will come from the tank through a pump and right into here. The gasoline goes into the bottom, which we call the float bowl, and it'll fill up until a little floaty bit closes a valve. It actually works exactly like a toilet. And through the magic of having two of them, I can show you exactly what that looks like. So in the bottom is something just like this. This is where the gasoline goes. It fills up. As the gas fills up, this little float comes up until it closes that valve. Then no more gas can come in. When it's full, the fuel will be above this little nozzle right here. This is called the jet. It's essentially just a straw. Really, if you break it down, this is all a carburetor is. When you look into the carburetor from this side, this is the throttle plate. When you press the gas pedal, it literally just turns this plate so that more air can get into the engine. When you look at the other side, you actually see a piston. This piston is controlled by a vacuum as the engine pulls air in. So at different engine speeds, this will be in different positions. As I pull this out of here, you'll actually see there's a needle that sits in the middle of the jet. This needle has a very specific shape so that as this goes up and down, it'll let more or less fuel out depending on what the engine needs at the time. And all of this is carefully set up so that no matter where this throttle is, and no matter what the engine speed is, you get just the right amount of fuel when everything's working properly. The last important thing to talk about on a carburetor is something called a choke. This is all set up to work really well when the engine is warm. But when the engine is cold, air is more dense, so it needs more fuel. That's where this part comes in, which is called the choke. All this does is add extra fuel to the engine until the engine has gotten up to temperature. On a lot of vehicles, old cars, motorcycles, there might actually be a choke lever that you pull to turn it on, but this carburetor actually has an automatic choke. How does that work without a computer? By temperature. This little piece here that you saw me take off of it has coolant that goes through it. There's a little bimetallic spring in here that works just like a thermostat. So as the engine warms up, the coolant warms up. As the coolant warms up, this thing gets hotter. As it gets hotter, this bimetallic spring starts to move. And the end result is that it turns this lever, which turns off the choke. I should take a second to say, do not do this with your own carburetor. Now water is going into this hose. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but the level in the hose is coming down as it fills this bowl. I'm going to keep filling it until it stops. I really wish I had my funnel. I don't know how clear it is, but the level is right here. Fill it some more. Okay. The water is stopped now. It's not going into the carburetor anymore. So once this is full of fuel, the air rushing by is actually going to carry it with it out this way and into what would be the engine. The engine would then compress that gasoline and air. The spark plug would go, that would ignite it, and that's where you get your power. Now you might be wondering, what's the point of going through the trouble of taking this off of the car? When you're troubleshooting, engines need 4 main things to work. That's air, fuel, ignition, and compression. By taking this off and making sure everything is working correctly, we're taking care of, ideally, the air and the fuel part. We're halfway there. Okay, so with the carburetor out of the car, this is a really good time to do a compression check. What that means is I'm gonna take this little tool here, screw it in where all the spark plugs go, and then crank the engine a few times. And the little dial on this is gonna tell us if it's making pressure the way that it's supposed to. All right, we're gonna start off with this number 1 cylinder. Putting an adapter in, getting it cranked right down eventually. Take the gauge off because it's just a little easier to get in. Tighten that down just by hand. Cool. And I get about 150. $170. $170 again. Yeah, and that one's also up at about the 160 mark. Now we're gonna do something called a wet compression check. I'm gonna do the exact same thing that I did, but first I'm gonna put some oil into the cylinders. Now that'll help seal up the piston ring. So if I see a different number on this number 1 cylinder, that means that we have a ring issue. Now we're up at 180. And on that one, I see 180. I'm asking a lot out of this little battery. Ooh, 190. That one is around 190 again. Okay, now that we've gotten this done, at least we know that the engine that's in the car is in reasonably healthy condition. The main thing to look for is that all of the cylinders are relatively even. And even though that number 1 is sitting a little bit lower than the others, it's not really enough for me to worry about. I think by the time it becomes a problem, I'll probably be pulling the engine anyway for one reason or another. The next step is to finish rebuilding the carburetor so it can go back in. Well, that's it for this time. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on the Slow Burn Garage, where we start to rebuild the carburetor.
Good, you doggy.